Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, Township Council Special Meeting, June 2nd, 2014. Meeting called to order by myself at 6 p.m. Please rise for flag salute. Mr. Valori, if you would.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Karifi?
Here.
Mr. DePiero?
Here.
Mr. Peluso?
Present.
Mr. Valori?
Here. Others present, Mayor Barberio, Joseph Kowalczyk, Acting Business Administrator / CFO, Paula Cosarelli, Assistant Business Administrator, John Inglesino, Esquire, Township Attorney, Yancey Wazermis, Township Clerk. The agenda of this meeting, to the extent known, is as follows: public hearing and adoption of ordinance 2014:16, an ordinance of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, County of Morris, and State of New Jersey, amending the zoning ordinance of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills in order to rezone certain properties to the RCW Recreation, Conservation, and Wildlife Zone District. Formal action may or may not be taken.
Statement of compliance. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided in accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Law by filing the notice in the office of the Township Clerk and by posting the meeting notice on the bulletin board at the Municipal Building on May 22nd, 2014, where it has remained posted since that date. A legal notice appeared in the Daily Record on May 29, 2014, and was forwarded by fax to the Star Ledger on Parsippany Life on May 22nd, 2014.
Ordinances for second reading and public hearing. Mr. DePiero.
Ordinance number 2014:16, an ordinance of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, County of Morris, and State of New Jersey, amending the zoning ordinance of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills in order to rezone certain properties to the RCW Recreation, Conservation, and Wildlife Zone District. A notice for the ordinance above was published in the Daily Record, the official newspaper of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, on May 23, 2014. Motion to accept that ordinance, 2014:16, be heard in its second and final reading by title only.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero,
Second it.
seconded by Mr. Valori. Roll call.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Mr. Peluso?
Yes.
Mr. Valori?
Yes.
Mr. Karifi?
Yes. Okay, at this time, we'll open up.
Mr. Council President, we have a brief presentation to be made for the benefit of the public and the governing body, and I'd like to just make a few comments, if I might, relative to this ordinance. There's a little bit of a history here. Back in 2011, Wildlife Preserve had demanded that Parsippany adjust its tax map to reflect the creation of 11 different building lots on a portion of its property. Parsippany reviewed the request in detail. We met with Wildlife Preserve. We felt their position was just simply incorrect, so we did not adhere to their request, and they sued the township. The case was decided in favor of the township by way of written opinion by Judge Weisenbeck back on November 26th of 2012. And at all times, Parsippany has stood ready, willing, and able to attempt to amicably resolve Wildlife Preserve's issues. In short, Wildlife Preserve wants to create approximately 13 building lots on the property. And from the township's perspective, the message is a bit mixed. On the one hand, Wildlife Preserve is in the business of preserving property for open space and habitat. They're a nonprofit, that's their charter. And yet, on the other hand, they want to create building lots and have indicated an intent to sell that property, building lots, to a developer. The reality is that a building lot, can be built upon if it's created. We understand that they also, Wildlife Preserve has also indicated a desire to simply try to preserve the value of the property for purposes of conveying easements to utilities and so forth. Just procedurally, at the April council meeting, that was April 22nd, the town council introduced an ordinance, and that was ordinance 2014-09, to rezone a portion of the wildlife preserve property from R1 and R3 to Recreation, Conservation, and Wildlife, RCW. Ordinance 2014:09 was referred to the Planning Board, who by memorandum dated May 12, 2014, unanimously found consistency between Ordinance 2014:09 and the Parsippany Master Plan. At its May meeting, that was May 20th of this year, council meeting, Ordinance 2014-09 was on the agenda for second reading. A motion was made, but there was no second. Prior to the end of that meeting on May 20th, May 20th, Wildlife Preserve had submitted an application to the Parsippany Planning Board seeking a 4-lot subdivision, and they also submitted a concept plan for 9 additional lots, for a total of 13. That's where I got the 13 lots from. Also, now turning back to the May 20th council meeting, the council introduced ordinance 2014:16, which is the subject of second reading, public hearing, and adoption tonight. That ordinance is identical to ordinance 2014:9, except there are a few additional recitals, and 2014:16 also proposes to would rezone certain property owned by Wildlife Preserve that is in the LIW5 zone to RCW. The council also established a special meeting for tonight to consider 2014:16 for second reading, again after public hearing and potential adoption. Tonight's meeting in this ordinance was properly noticed under applicable law, namely NJSA 40:49-2A, and also the notice that is applicable to this particular ordinance under the municipal land use law, which is at NJSA 40:55D-62.1. We have received various pieces of correspondence. Just want to confirm that those are in the record. We have correspondence from Wildlife Preserves by Len Ferriero, which was addressed to Mrs. Pizicki. We have a letter from Ms. Pizicki, Mary Pizicki, which is undated. It's handwritten in February 17th, 2014 to Mr. Ferriero. We have email from Ken Pizicki, at least it's from his email address, although I think Mary Pizicki indicated at the last meeting that they share an email, and it's signed by her, so although it's his email address, it was from Mary Pizicki, and an acknowledgement from Mr. Ferriero. We have a copy of the said May 12th Planning Board Review Memorandum. We have a letter from Counsel for Wildlife Preserve, Minor and Landis, Mr. Fiore, dated May 19th. A letter which raises notice defect issues with regard to the prior ordinance 09. It also alleges that the ordinance amounts to a taking. And we also have a planning report from Wildlife Preserve's planner, Mr. Steck, also received on May 19th, which alleges that the ordinance amounts to spot zoning. We have a May 30th letter from Mr. Fiore, which encloses a protest petition with respect to tonight's ordinance. We have a letter dated June 2nd, 2014, from Anita Austenberg Shotwell, who is a trustee for Wildlife Preserves, which is addressed to the mayor. We have a letter dated also today from Stephanie Silva of Florham Park. And that, I think, Madam Clerk, concludes a review of the In addition to that, we'll provide a brief presentation in a moment, is Ed Snikes, who is the town planner. Again, the ordinance that is the subject of tonight's hearing, 2014:16, with respect to the properties that are currently zoned R1 and R3, is exactly the same as ordinance 2014:09, and therefore I find that the planning board memorandum of May 12th is very much applicable in its findings in terms of consistency with the master plan. Procedurally, in order for this ordinance to pass, it would require 4 affirmative votes of the governing body. I do believe that Wildlife Preserve has filed a valid protest petition under applicable law, and therefore 3 votes will not suffice. You will need 4 votes in order to pass this ordinance. At this time, I'd like to call upon Mr. Snikes to provide a brief presentation with regard to the spot zoning issue that was raised by Mr. Steck. I will also provide my legal opinion with regard to the takings issue, indicating that I do not believe that this ordinance is a taking or is confiscatory under the law in any way. I don't believe that that argument has merit. The notice issue that was raised in connection with the previous council meeting has no applicability to this meeting, and I would ask for Mr. Snikes to provide a brief overview to the council and to the public as to what the ordinance seeks to do, and also to provide his opinion with respect to the issue of spot zoning.
Thank you. Good evening, Council President, members of the council, mayor, and the public. It's my pleasure to be here this evening. Again, my name is Ed Snikes. I'm with the firm of Burgess & Associates, professional planners and landscape architects. What I wanted to do this evening as well is to provide the council as well as the public a brief overview.
Ed, is the mic on?
Yes. Yes, it's indicated to be on. Oh, there we go. How's that? Is that better? Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Thank you. What I was mentioning a moment ago is that I wanted to provide the council with a brief overview of the ordinance from the purposes down to how it's compliant and consistent with the master plan and the land use element of the master plan. First, the purpose of the zoning is to rezone the lands designated to an RCW district, Recreation, Conservation, and Wildlife. That district currently exists on several areas within the Troy Meadows area as it currently is configured. But what we're looking to do is effectuate the land use plan and several recommendations of the master plan document to effectuate those recommendations. In addition to that, we're making recognition of some of the nationally recognized critical environmental categories that are identified in the Troy Meadows areas. I just wanted to point that out for the record. In addition to that, the properties as council had provided for the board, the additional properties that have been added are Block 765, Lot 68, 81.8, and Block 765, Lot 79. In addition to what was previously identified is Block 765, Lot 81, and Block 765, Lots 1 and 2 that were approved by subdivision. And what I have for you this evening is an exhibit that we prepared, which outlines in a hatch pattern the overall areas that are in question in this ordinance, so that there is an understanding of where we're looking. What you'll see is in the northerly direction is the Route 80 boundary along the northerly portion of the map. On the right-hand side is Route 280. On the left-hand side are the residentially developed areas that are located within the Allen Drive and Troy Meadow Road areas. I want to make sure I had those names correct. And then to the south is additional wildlife preserves property and also the boundary of East Hanover for purposes of orientation. Under a planning analysis, as council had mentioned to the council, is the information necessary under the rezoning as established by municipal land use law. Under the municipal land use law 40:55D-62, it identifies that the proposed zoning needs to be drawn with reasonable consideration of the character of the area. So I'll be touching on that in my presentation. In addition, it needs to look at the use and whether or not the use is appropriate for the land and what the land can carry. Also, it indicates that the lands be suitable for such development. So those issues are what I'll be touching on in my presentation. And it would also go to addressing the issues of spot zoning, as Mr. Inglesino pointed out a moment ago. We know, and what's been identified in the master plan, is that the Troy Meadows area contains an extensive collection of wetlands and floodplains throughout the entire region. The area encompasses approximately 3,100 acres in total as a wetlands complex. That's outside, including Parsippany-Troy Hills, as well as other municipalities that surround it. There's approximately 1,700 acres lying within Parsippany-Troy Hills of that extensive wetland. And so you can see just by the sheer numbers alone that it's an extensive area of wetlands and wetland complexes. The wetlands have been identified largely as in exceptional resource classification. That exceptional resource classification calls for the highest and most demanding buffer requirement based on NJDEP requirements of 150 foot from the actual limit of wetlands. And that's a considerable component of this in the consideration of the rezoning of these tracts, is the extensive quality of the wetlands and the extensive size of the wetland. In addition to that, the area is also encompassed by the 100-year floodplain, largely encompassed for the majority of the area in question. You have a 100-year floodplain surrounding the Whippany River and the Rockaway River watersheds that also encompass the area. In addition to that, there's unfavorable soil types, what have been identified as areas that have very poor drainage, soil types themselves, or have very limited drainage in this area. And so those three features are known constraints that we wanted to identify for the purposes of the rezoning. I think go a large way towards the recommendations. In addition to that, what's been identified in the master plan and several other components of the master plan, which I'll talk about in a moment, is that there's also regional regulations that are making recommendations for the Troy Meadows area. The first is that there's on the national level, there's a natural landmarks program that Troy Meadows is identified as a natural landmarks program, and that would be the Troy Meadows area as well. In addition to that, we also have the New Jersey Heritage Program, and it's recommended that this area be preserved under the New Jersey Heritage Program. It identifies, and I'm quoting from the New Jersey Heritage Program, if these areas are allowed to be degraded or destroyed, we may lose some of the most unique components of our natural heritage. Another feature that's been identified from a regional level is the Morris County Natural Resource Inventory. It identifies that Troy Meadows is one of 4 areas with a I-A Exceptional Ecological Area designation. Another very important feature, I think, identifying the appropriate zoning for the area. It's also noted the Highlands designation for this area. It actually designates this entire area that's being rezoned as a preservation zone in the Highlands Master Plan. Also, the properties in question also are largely encompassed by a PA5 designation in the state plan. PA5 is a critical environmental resource designation in the state plan. Another important feature to be identified. It's also noted in other publications that it's one of the largest freshwater marshes in New Jersey. The Whippany River watershed in the Passaic River Basin goes through the swamp before and connecting to the Rockaway River, which also helps support this designation as well. Just touching on the township master plan. For consistency, it's an important component for this council to consider, is the consistency with the master plan. The most current master plan is the 2004 re-examination report. In the re-examination report, it says the Troy Meadows area is specifically recommended for protection and preservation in the goals and objectives sections of the 2004 master plan re-examination report and land use plan. Under goal number 11, it says specifically again, protect and preserve the environmentally sensitive areas of Troy Meadows. And under the policy statement, I just wanted to quote a few features, which I feel is very important to identify. It notes that the township recognizes the area known as Troy Meadows as a vast environmentally sensitive and critical ecosystem for the region that encompasses approximately 3,100 acres, as I mentioned a moment ago, with over 1,740 acres of total within Parsippany. Another very, I think, appropriate point that's being made here is that it also identifies, it is the township's policy that the lands of Troy Meadows represents an invaluable natural resource that should be preserved in its natural state, and development in this area should be avoided in order to promote the public health and general welfare of the township and the region. It's also noted in the land use plan component of the master plan that the site you're seeing here, the areas that you're seeing here designated within the R1 and R3 sections of the zoning that overlays this area, as well as the RCW area. It identifies those areas as recommended for a RCW land use designation. So there you have, again, another positive recommendation from the master plan that the area be rezoned to RCW. It's also noted on the land use plan, though, that the area adjacent to 280 that's currently zoned LIW5 is still within the LIW5 designation. But there is another section within the master plan calls out for lots 79 and 81.8 to be rezoned from the LIW5 to the RCW district. Again, another item of consistency from the recommendations that are provided in this report, in this ordinance. Just again, for further background, not to belabor the point, but just that the prior master plan of 1987, 1976, and 1968 had very similar policy statements of the preservation and identification of the particular sensitivities of the Troy Meadows area. So again, going towards the point of making recommendations for the rezoning. Just wanted to touch on a few other items of the open space and recreation element of the master plan, another component or subset of the master plan document. It has specific goals of maintaining and enhancing public open space, preservation of the character of the community, support conservation efforts in order to preserve environmentally sensitive lands, natural features, open space, and protect residential neighborhoods. Provide sufficient open space and recreation opportunities on an equal and accessible basis in various neighborhoods or communities in the township. It also goes on to note in the open space plan that the under special natural areas that Troy Meadows is one of the Parsippany's most significant natural regions to be preserved. It identifies that 3 major rivers and their tributaries converge in Troy Meadows. If let to do its work naturally, this wetland complex allows a slow seepage into the main water bodies as they travel downstream. It also notes that extensive alteration of the waterway in Patterson, further down in the Passaic River Basin, and other communities downstream, that water flows and backs up within the Troy Meadow area, which is overcome with water and recommended for further preservation due to that feature. Just a quick summary of some of the specific findings for your consideration. Again, I think the components of the master plan spell it out for themselves, but that I feel it's consistent with the comprehensive policy for the area since 1968. So I think the council can be assured that there has been substantial backing for the area to be preserved. Furthermore, in accordance with the MLUL and master plan recommendations, we feel it's effectuating the recommendations of the master plan and those components. The specific components is to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands in the state in a manner which will promote the public health, safety, and general welfare. And the rezoning of these tracts, my professional opinion, would do that. Also, to promote the conservation of open space and valuable natural resources in the state, and to prevent urban sprawl and degradation of the environment through improper use of land. The RCW designation would help to preserve land in consistency with their current use. We also find it substantially consistent with the land use plan since 1998, the prior re-examination report and land use plan prior to the 2004 document. And so overall, in conclusion, the proposal is considerate of the surrounding conditions, substantially consistent with the master plan, and promotes a number of goals and objectives of the master plan. And so with that, in my professional opinion, from the standpoint of spot zoning, when you're furthering these features and components of the master plan and being so substantially consistent with various objectives of that document, this is nothing but positive planning in compliance with the master plan and not spot zoning for specific use. That's inconsiderate or irresponsible to the surrounding conditions.
And Mr. Council President, just to follow up and amplify briefly on the issue of spot zoning, particularly for members of the public and the governing body. Spot zoning has been defined as a rezoning of a lot or parcel of land to benefit an owner for a use incompatible with surrounding uses and not for the purpose or effect of furthering the comprehensive zoning plan. Now, while the normal case of spot zoning seeks to relieve a specific parcel of property from a zoning burden, it is nevertheless likewise beyond the municipal power to create a burden on a specific piece of property where that burden is not created in accordance with a comprehensive plan designed to promote the general welfare. That would be inverse spot zoning, which is essentially what Mr. Fiore, the attorney for Wildlife Preserve, is arguing is being done in this instance. However, I would point him to the Manalapan Realty v. Township Committee case, which is at 272 NJ Super 1. It's an appellate division case from 1994, which in essence holds that so long as the zoning is consistent with the master plan, that in and of itself is dispositive, is a dispositive fact that the town has not acted improperly, has not engaged in spot zoning or inverse spot zoning. And so it is that consistency with the action taken by the governing body in the ordinance and the consistency of that ordinance with the master plan that I think, and the case law says as I read it, is dispositive to inoculate and protect the town from challenges of spot zoning. And Mr. Snikes has indicated his opinion that this ordinance is consistent with the master plan. You have the memo from the Planning Board of May 12th, which has made a finding of consistency with the master plan. So in my opinion, the argument of spot zoning is weak.
Question for you, Mr. Snikes. RCW Recreation, was that recommended back in 1998?
Yes, in fact, actually, the RCW zoning was recommended in the land use plan back in 1998.
Administration and then RC, okay, didn't change it. And how about in 2004, the same thing?
Same thing.
Right.
That concludes us.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I entertain a motion to open a public hearing on this ordinance and this ordinance only.
Motion.
Motion made by Mr. Paluso,
Second motion.
seconded by Mr. Valori. Roll call.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mr. Paluso,
Yes.
Mr. Valori,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes. You'll be given 3 minutes. Please sign in, state your name and address.
I was hoping as one of the property owners, we could have a little more latitude.
We have to keep it at 3 minutes for
Ma'am, legally, and let me be clear about this, legally, it would be inappropriate for the council president to show any leeway or favoritism to any person who addresses the governing body. It is important that the ground rules be the same for everyone. The council president has indicated that each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes to say whatever it is that they would like to say, and those are the rules.
Okay. Well, I'm a trustee for Wildlife Preserves.
Please state your name and address.
Anita Shotwell, and it's North Road in Flanders, New Jersey. I think the reason you see residents as supporting this ordinance is because you've positioned it as a case of development versus preservation, and that is not the case at all, despite and any of the things that you're citing about the subdivisions and whatnot. I had also heard supporters last week express concerns about property rights, and I would bet that members of the public, given the option of preserving both our property rights and that property, would elect to do that. This ordinance, unfortunately, offers only the appearance of genuine protection for the meadows. In actuality, it precludes wildlife preserves from negotiating any sort of equitable and permanent conservation easement on its property and leaves wildlife preserves vulnerable to further encroachment on the meadows. This ordinance was introduced, presumably, as a well-intentioned measure to protect upland portions of the meadows from a perceived threat of development after wildlife preserve sought to subdivide 2 upland parcels. These subdivisions are related to the delineation of wetlands and are not related to development or destruction of habitat. We have had no offers, meetings, or correspondence with builders or developers, nor are we entertaining such offers. Our opposition to the RCW zone change ordinance involves the devaluation of our property and the value held by that property in its natural state under the existing zoning designations. Since these areas in questions do not meet the legal threshold as environmentally sensitive, a zone change in and of itself does not offer permanent protection. This zoning could be reversed or the use expanded at any time by any administration. What the RCW ordinance does accomplish is a significant decrease in the value of this property for the owner. Any easement or transfer under the new zoning would deprive wildlife preserves of reasonable value for its property, since future transactions, including permanent conservation easements, are based on a percentage of the existing zone value. Any decrease in that property value also makes the meadows more vulnerable to encroachment or condemnation by any entity that would pay market value for its use. As the steward and owner of the property in question, wildlife preserves would be obligated to challenge the zone change and the subsequent devaluation, as would virtually any landowner, regardless of their future intentions. And in response to the introduction of this ordinance is why Wildlife Preserves was compelled to file site plans, and that was after the introduction of the ordinance, to preserve at least some of the value as currently zoned. But this does not signify intent to develop. On the contrary, it means that we recognize the value and the importance of preserving it in its natural state, and it's unfortunate that natural treasures can only be quantified in terms of development value, but the legal value and definition cannot otherwise adequately value land that is environmentally sensitive. As a nonprofit organization, we do not receive free services or have a no expense operation. For a nonprofit to compete, we have to guard our limited resources, which means that we cannot simply accept the devaluation of our property. The sale of property or development rights is not unusual for us and recently resulted in the permanent natural protection, not development, of several residentially zoned properties, including a large developable tract in Harding that is now part of the Great Swamp, and Wildlife Preserve's Johnsonburg Preserve in Warren County. All we are asking for is an opportunity to sit down and negotiate, even have a dialogue with the council, with the town, with the mayor, and we have not had an opportunity to do that. We would like to be able to explain to you the reasons behind the subdivision and the reason for that we oppose the ordinance. Otherwise, this ordinance goes through, there's something we're obligated to fight.
Thank you. If whoever's going to be coming up next, if you want to come up into the front row, you can sign in ahead of time. Thank you.
Nancy Brighton, 24 Maplewood Drive. I'm the chair of the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee. The committee is in favor of this ordinance change to the RCW zoning. We feel it will protect the cultural and natural resources of the area. The properties are already signed as being, conservation, preservation zones, and we like to keep them that way. I think some of the concern from the public is coming from 2 properties that were apparently once part or very near to the Troy Meadows that have been developed fairly recently for housing. And so we want to maintain that line that has always been, if you look at maps at what Troy Meadows was, it has gradually decreased. We want to prevent the line from decreasing any further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jackie Puglas, 9 Howell Court, Parsippany, New Jersey. I just wanted to say a couple things. Number one, as far as the zoning change goes, I understand you said you gave proper notice and all this good stuff. As a resident, if I were to do a zoning change, I would have to send letters to everybody that abutted to the property. And I think you'd see much more people in this room had people that backed up to wildlife preserving property been notified by a letter instead of trying to catch it in one of the publications. And many of us don't get papers anymore. We're internet, or you catch it here or there, or you happen to find the letter. So that's my first comment. Second comment is I've backed up to Wildlife Preserves Inc. for 28 years, and they've been wonderful neighbors. Okay, they have not developed the property. They have put up with easements, 80, 287, all sorts. I think they're fighting one for PSE&G right now, taking part of their land slowly. Instead of standing here and making ordinances like this, why don't we just buy the property and take it off the market? People have been talking for years about it. Morris County was going to give money. You take money from my taxes all the time for open space, and we put it in pocket parks, and we bought the campsite. We've done a lot of wonderful things, but that's where the emphasis should be, on permanently buying this property, taking it off the market, thanking Wildlife Preserves for their many, many years of keeping pristine property in the middle of suburbia, and that's it. Be done with it. I think we're wasting a lot of time with pocket zoning and this. And how do you value a piece of wildlife property if you don't maintain something you can sell? How would you then value it? It's like spot zoning in reverse, you know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, under NJSA 40:55D-62.1, all property owners within 200 feet were notified by certified letter.
I'll sign in.
That's the law.
Nicholas Homiak, Lake Hiawatha. Once this property was allowed itself, the property owners, the Corporation Wildlife Preserve, the National Natural Landmark Program, that opened up the door for the surrounding zoning to improve. The only question I would have is what value, or the value is beyond money. The value is centered in community and preservation of land for enhancement and so the forces of nature could do what they have to do. So it's not money. It's a different realm of value. And once Wildlife Preserve stepped into the realm of the NNL program, we should have all been dragged into this a long time ago. And now it's happening, but Wildlife Preserve is going this way and Parsippany is going this way when we both should be going together. Because if there's anxiety about worth, sooner or later down the line, when the going gets tough, somebody's going to sell this land for a profit. Somebody's going to have a $600,000 home looking in the Troy Meadows with who knows what effect or whatever. But the idea is the land enhancement for the community, the state, and the nation. You're talking about a national park. If the desire was great enough, and if the Congress down there in Washington ever straightened out, it might even be a national park like Patterson Falls became, a form of, permanently preserved forever. Nobody would have to pay for it. The federal government could pay for it. But I would say it's just beyond money. And there should be a letter from Deborah DiCinzono from the NNL program coordinator that she sent to Parsippany today. I would encourage you to put that in your folder. Yes, I have a copy of it.
30
She
seconds.
said she sent it. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
Evening. My name is William Ames. I'm a resident of Hanover Township, a person been concerned for many years with open space as well as with property rights. And I think that you're on the cusp of both of those issues, and it's a concern to me. The United States is a republic. The republic's goal, the difference between a democracy, which is basically mob rule, and a republic is the protection of the minority. Wildlife Preserves has taken its own money to acquire this property for many, many years and protect it against lots of incursions, including attempts by adjacent properties to use their land for purposes other than preservation and natural state. Among them, multiple utilities, the state of New Jersey, highways, occasionally Parsippany having interest in the property. Many of the speakers talk about it would be nice to preserve it, but nobody talks about personal property rights. And the focus of the United States, in no small measure, was on personal property rights. It is just wrong to devalue and confiscate property use without compensation. It's just wrong. None of you want that to happen to your land. I can tell you hundreds of stories of individuals in this state that have experienced that under the Highlands Act, the Pinelands Act, the Meadowlands Act, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Always in the excuse of preserving water and making open space for the public. The problem is the public doesn't pay for it. So the person that held it last when the music stopped and they didn't get a chair are the ones that get killed. In this particular case, it's very ironic that Wildlife Preserves has defended and protected that property for decades against development and has expressed clearly its intent to do so going forward. So I am having a problem understanding why the Township of Parsippany would so aggressively take away the value of the property and not want to address the question of compensation. It's truly a matter of fairness, and I would ask and really encourage you to think about your property. What happens when that happens to you? The concern that Wildlife Preserves faces is how do you...
30 seconds.
I'm sorry?
30 seconds.
Okay. When you are operating property without an income, you need to have the flexibility with banking and other things to borrow against the value of your property from time to time. So property values matter. You take that away, you cause direct financial and operational harm, which is contrary to what you're trying to do. If it becomes easier for all the utilities and others to take that property, you're not going to be protecting it. I would ask you to give that very serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. See no one else come forward at this time. Entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'm Fariello, Wildlife Preserve.
Please state your address.
I'm from Whippany, New Jersey. Yeah, at the May 20th council meeting, I spoke about cooperation between the township and Wildlife Preserves, and it seemed like everyone was in agreement. The next day, I sent a letter to the mayor and council requesting a meeting to foster cooperation and work out any differences that this ordinance is trying to address. Last Tuesday, I ran into the mayor at Town Hall and personally requested a meeting to discuss this ordinance and its issues. I'm publicly requesting that council table this ordinance and meet with the property owner before proceeding. Rezoning the property may not be necessary and in fact may serve to be counterproductive. I've heard from neighbors at Parsippany Estates that two women walked the neighborhood passing out flyers, scaring their neighbors, telling them that Wildlife Preserves was planning to build 13 houses between Marcia Terrace and Bennett Court and asking them to come to this meeting. No doubt they were referring to an unbuilt lots of a 1954 subdivision of Parsippany Estates that Wildlife Preserves purchased from the developer in 1956 and kept it vacant land despite that the lots were once approved for development. Of course, Wildlife has no plans to develop its property, but has now been forced to file limited site plans in order to protect the property values against this confiscatory zone amendment. This ordinance seems to have been conceived when Wildlife filed a minor subdivision of its upland property in order to do a wetlands delineation. Our engineer testified to that at the planning board. That's what the purpose of the minor subdivision was. We subdivided the upland property from the meadows, and we were going to do a wetlands delineation. And your planner it's deceiving because, yes, Troy Meadows meadowlands are environmentally sensitive, but this area you are rezoning is uplands. It's out of the planning area number 5. It's not environmentally sensitive, but we still have no desire to develop it. But I just want to clarify that. You can bunch Troy Meadows and say it goes, a long way, but when you look at the maps, this is not wetlands and this is not environmentally sensitive lands. The township officials and professionals did not contact Wildlife before jumping to conclusions that Wildlife was developing the land and introduced the zone to diminish the property rights and equity of Wildlife's land holdings in Parsippany. Wildlife is against the RCW zone because it devalues wildlife property to little value and basically no use, and in effect makes it easier for government and utilities to take Troy Meadows by eminent domain. Wildlife Preserves is private property purchased and managed with private funds. Wildlife received Green Acres property tax exemption by keeping its property open to the public.
Okay, sir, time's up.
Okay. I'd just like to close by saying we think you might agree that Wildlife's done a pretty good job acquiring and protecting this property the last 60 years. And on behalf of Wildlife and the interest of good planning, we urge the council to table this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the council, Mayor, Mr. Inglesino. It
Sir,
strikes
please
me-
state your name and address.
I'm sorry, I'm Jack Pugos. I'm a 9 Howell Court. It strikes me that actually as very odd and a serious lacking that the council has posed this ordinance, and the ordinance affects one organization, one landowner, and one landowner only, and you haven't spoken to that landowner. You haven't negotiated with that landowner. I'm appalled by that. Second of all, and by the way, I urge you to table this until you have sat down, negotiated with the landowner, and attempted to work things out, because I believe there's going to be a battle in court, and I don't think that's in anybody's interest. Okay? So I'm thoroughly confused by why you would not do what is sound business and management practice. The second thing is, why now? We've lived in Parsippany and bordered on the wildlife preserve property, beautiful property, for 28 years. Why now? Can you answer that question? Someone, please? Thank you.
My name is Dave Blinder, and I'm from Denville, New Jersey, and I'm a lifelong resident. My parents and grandparents are both from Parsippany, so I know this area well. And my role in this is I'm a professional nature photographer and conservation photographer for New Jersey Audubon Society, the Morris County Park Commission. I contribute to Essex County Park System, and I'm a friend to Wildlife Preserves. So it's very valuable land to me as well as them. We really want permanent preservation of land with no construction permanently on the land, and that's what Wildlife Preserves represents. I don't know if Len really talked about it, but we want a permanent conservation easement on the land. Wildlife Preserves wants to agree to that. There'll be no building on the land ever, and they would happily sign off on that as the landowners. I understand a lot of the residents are very concerned about their backyards, and they should be. They're concerned someone could put a swimming pool or a condo in their backyard, and that makes sense. Nobody wants that in their backyard, and that's not what Wildlife Preserves wants to do either. If you look at Len Fariello's personal track record, he is the property manager of Wildlife Preserves right now. By trade, he's a wildlife rehabilitator. He is not a builder. He is not a real estate mogul. No one in Wildlife Preserves has that role here. He does wildlife crossings for migrations periodically as a volunteer for the state of New Jersey. He does not make money off that. I do the same thing. And many of our other friends here do that also. Len's other credentials, former president of Citizens for Controlled Development of Hanover and Parsippany. So again, you're not looking at a real estate mogul, you're looking at a long-term conservationist of Morris County. And you know, he does not want to build on this land. He does not want to infringe on people's backyards, does not want to high rises. We definitely don't want pools going in there. We don't want ball fields. We want the natural state preserved of this area permanently. They do a good job of maintaining land. They've done it since the 50s. Len has worked with the group since the 70s, and they've never constructed on the land. So we don't want the land devalued or taken from them. There's no reason to do that. You know, I just wanted to talk about his character, and I think people don't know who he is or what he's about. No one is trying to make money off this land. We're trying to preserve the value of the land and maintain it for the public use in its natural state. And that's why we would like further discussions and not have this ordinance passed right now without talking about a permanent conservation easement for no development permanently on the land. So I think that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, see no one else come forward, entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Valori. Roll call.
Before we call the roll, can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
This is for either Mr. Inglesino or Mr. Sinakis. Permanent conservation easement, I'd like to understand that. If Wildlife Preserves were to do a permanent conservation easement on all the property that we are planning to rezone to RCW, would that forever restrict building on those lots that they're trying to subdivide?
The answer is a conservation easement would provide a permanent mechanism to preserve the property. The question is, you know, how would you value the worth of the conservation easement? Property that, I think it's a fair statement to say that property that is zoned for open space generally will be less valuable and cost less than property that is zoned for R1 or R3. So that's, you know, that's...
Is a conservation easement the same as a deed restriction?
No. A deed restriction, well, they're similar in that both restrictions, what they say, run with the land. They bind future owners of the property to the restriction. But they are technically two different things. A deed restriction is actually a restriction that is in the deed itself. A conservation easement is a separate document that would be filed as an encumbrance against the property. They're functionally equivalent in the sense that they provide permanent restrictions on the property. But they are in different documents, and it is easier, theoretically, to remove a conservation easement than it is to remove a deed restriction, because the deed restriction becomes part of the deed itself. Conservation easement is a separate document. There's consideration paid for the conservation easement. It is possible to remove a conservation easement, although easements such as that are usually intended to be permanent in nature.
Okay. Well, my concern was the letter from Anita Shotwell pointed out that even if we rezone this property to RCW, some future mayor and some future council could rezone it back to something else. That's not permanent either. So I was just wondering, is RCW the way, well, yes, Ed, I know the master plan is saying RCW, but if Wildlife Preserves promised to do this permanent conservation easement on all these properties that they are before the planning board and want to subdivide, would that accomplish our goals?
No. Because they're not, well, they're not, you're not, they're doing the subdivision in order to create create value in the property. They want the property to be worth more. If they accomplish the goal of a subdivision, and then as a condition of the subdivision or simultaneously with the subdivision, they then put a conservation easement on the property, it would negate the reason for the subdivision, because the conservation easement would bring the value of the property back down, you know, to what it was. Part of the impetus, the question was asked about the timing, and at least from my perspective, part of the impetus of the timing is the change in the law that occurred last year. It used to be, we used to have the time of decision rule in the state of New Jersey, which was that it was the zoning in place at the time of the development that governed the use of the property. So you could have been an applicant for development, paid your engineers and your lawyers, nobody likes to pay lawyers, but pay the lawyers, the architects, the engineers, and so forth, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars getting an approval, and then after you get the approval, the town could then change the zone, and you couldn't go forward. The legislature last year changed the law to now make it time of submission. So now you are, as a property owner or as an applicant, entitled to the zoning at the time you submit your application to the planning board. So in this particular instance, one of the reasons I would suspect why Wildlife Preserve ran in to file a subdivision application was because they knew that if their application was submitted prior to the zone change, that they were assured of R1 zoning. It wasn't anything the town could do to change that if they submitted their application prior to the zone change. So that change in the law has, I think, really caused municipalities to be much more vigilant about zoning for various properties, because prior to last year, you could change, you know, an applicant could submit an application and then you could change the zone and the town would have the benefit of that changed zone. No longer that way. That's new. So that's something to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Mr. Inglesino, I have an additional question. Picking up what Mike was saying, I was thinking the same thing he was mentioning. But if we put the restriction that we can put the verbiage in perpetuity, that it could not be changed in the future by an administration or a council, is that possible?
Not in a zoning ordinance, you
Not in
can't.
the zoning ordinance.
No, zoning ordinance is, I forget which speaker, may have been Mr. Ferriero, who was also a former elected official, and he knows this, and he's correct.
You
is
cannot
that
bind future
You
council.
can't bind future governing bodies. A zone change can be, zoning can be amended at any time.
So in essence, what we speak about today it could be changed tomorrow. So by looking at the change of ordinance today with the current body that's here and the current trustees of wildlife, if either one changes, they could decide to build on that property in the future.
Correct. In fact, you know, they have submitted, as Mr. Ferriero indicated, they in response to the introduction of the ordinance, they submitted a subdivision application for 4 lots. They obviously wanted to get that in before any further action was taken on the zone, because they wanted to preserve their zoning. And under the new law, time of application, time of submission of the application, you guarantee the benefit of that zoning. They also submitted, and so that application that's been submitted before the planning board has the benefit of the R1 or R3 zone, whichever zone it's in. And that application will be heard pursuant to the zoning that is currently in effect.
So, Mr. Inglesino, that would answer the public's question as to why now.
I think it should, but they've submitted, so the action, if you adopt this ordinance tonight, this ordinance will not alter or change the application that's been submitted for the 4 lots. The planning board will consider that application in the ordinary course under the current zoning. There is, as I understand it, a separate concept plan that has also been submitted to the planning board for an additional 9 lots. That is not an application, that's a concept plan. And as I understand it, I haven't reviewed it, but from what I've been told, it was submitted as a concept plan, not as an application, and so it would appear that that if you were to take action on the ordinance tonight, that would have an impact on Wildlife Preserve's desire to create an additional 9 lots.
And Mr. Inglesino, a follow-up question. Did you receive any letters or correspondences from Wildlife Preserves indicating the property is for sale right now?
I did not. I was told, however, by their lawyer that selling to a developer was an option that they were considering.
What lawyer?
Mr. Fiore. That is true. That was a telephone conversation that we had, and I had it on speaker, so there was an associate in my office who was witness to it. So that is a conversation that occurred.
Mr. Inglesino, is there a conversation that they were willing to sell the property to our township?
They have not made an offer. They have expressed publicly that they would like to sit down. But again, you know, the way the state has created the law, if you were to table the ordinance, and next week they came in with a subdivision application for those 9 lots, well, then you've lost the ability to change the zone to take away their ability to have a 9-lot subdivision as a matter of right.
But the zoning change would not prevent us from sitting down at a future date to purchase the property.
Correct. There's no reason why, if you were inclined to adopt the zoning ordinance before you tonight, there's no reason why we could not sit down with Wildlife Preserve and negotiate either a conservation easement or a purchase or some other long-term arrangement with regard to that property.
Now, we attempted to do that years ago. Mr. Ferraiolo can remember that. We had a commitment from the state of New Jersey for Green Acres dollars. We had a commitment from Morris County for open space dollars. We had a commitment from the Morris Lands Conservancy for dollars. We had altogether probably about $7 million in commitment to purchase the property, and we would have gone into debt for the rest. But Wildlife Preserve was not interested in selling at that time. I think the problem that killed it was the state issues hunting licenses, and wildlife wants absolutely no hunting ever on their property. I think the state wants to be able to cull herds when there's too many or whatever, and so those dollars dropped out, and then the negotiations just got stale, and we never got anywhere with it. That's a little history, right, Glenn? Is that pretty accurate? Just yes or no's.
The township would never commit to what they were going to do with the property, so they would not commit to selling it.
I never heard that. Okay. We were going to keep it as open space.
Well, that's what you would do. You'd
To
keep
never
it.
have it developed.
If you buy it with open space, it stays open space to perpetuity.
Yeah, those are the
so
strings attached to
that's what
Green
would happen.
Acres is you cannot develop it,
Right.
ever. No, well, you could, but we would never do that.
Well,
That's environmentally sensitive land, we would never have done that. In fact, that is my concern with the highlands that you want to subdivide, is that borders the environmentally sensitive area, and a development there would be a further infringement closer to the sensitive areas, and that's why I'd be concerned about the highlands ever being developed too. I think it should all be preserved in its entirety.
Any other questions? Okay, Mr. DePiero. Good.
Next part.
need a roll call on to close the...
Close the public
Yeah,
hearing.
it's a roll call.
Yeah.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mr. Paluso,
Yes.
Mr. Valori,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
Whereas the above ordinance was read in title on second reading and a hearing held thereon, now therefore be it resolved that said ordinance be passed on final reading, and that a notice of final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the resolution above.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero,
Seconded.
seconded by Mr. Valori. Roll call.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mr. Paluso,
Before I cast my vote, I just wanted to say that I'm an advocate of preserving the property and not building upon the property. That's important. It's the preservation of the adjacent neighbors, to wildlife being a sensitive area. And also, after casting my vote, I would definitely like to sit down with wildlife preservers and talk about if they're willing to purchase the property. I vote yes.
Mr. Valori,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Before I vote, I would also like to say that I'm in favor of preserving the land, and I do like that idea to be able to sit down with Wildlife Preserve and try to come to a negotiation and a resolution for that. I vote yes.
Four votes.
4 votes.
4 votes, so it passes.
Where's Brian?
Not here. Okay, at this time, we're going to be going into, the council will be going into closed session. Read a resolution, whereas the Open Publics Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231, permits the exclusion of the public from a meeting in certain circumstances, and whereas the Township Council is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist, and whereas the Township Council wishes to discuss attorney-client privilege and pending litigation, and whereas minutes will be kept, and once the matter involving the confidentiality of the above no longer requires confidentiality, the minutes can be made public. Now therefore be it resolved by the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills that the public be excluded from this meeting. Motion to adjourn into closed session by myself, seconded
Second.
by Mr. DePiero. Roll call.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mr. Paluso,
Yes.
Mr. Valori,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
We're on.
Okay, entertain a motion to...
Make a motion?
Second.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Valori, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mr. Paluso,
Yes.
Mr. Valori,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes. Okay, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to open up the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Paluso. Roll call.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mr. Paluso,
Yes.
Mr. Valori,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes. Okay, be given 5 minutes. Please state your name and address to sign in.
Jonathan Nelson, 202 Patriots Road. Joe, how are you? Just have a couple questions for you.
Okay, hold on.
And,
Well,
I'll answer.
okay.
At the end.
And Paula, maybe you have the answer as well. Over at the golf, at Knoll, we have a starter at, not starter, golf pro at the west and the east, right?
An assistant golf pro is at the east.
Okay.
why don't you,
Golf
Mr.
pro at the west.
Mr. Nelson, why don't you ask your questions and then have them
We'll
addressed
answer
at the
them all,
end
yeah.
of your time?
Okay. All right. My question is, I believe that the golf pro at the west is like an outside contractor, but the east pro is a town employee. Is that something that we've always done? Because I was always under the impression that golf pro was contracted out and not a civil service or a township employee. My other question is, over the weekend I was going over the white collar salary ordinance, and as you probably know, there are a dozen employees currently over the salary cap right now. I just gave it to Yancy which the employees are. But more importantly, of those 12 employees, 6 of them were overpaid last year. What happens with that?
I assume with the people who are over the salary cap in 2014, if the council decides to amend the salary ordinance again, it would be retroactive to January. I would assume that would probably be the case. For 2013, what's the procedure? How did that happen? Who's responsible for seeing and making sure that the employees are not paid over the cap? And what happened there? That's it. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll answer your questions regarding the golf course first. The Knoll West Golf Pro is a contracted bidded item. The Knoll East Assistant Golf Pro falls under the Golf Pro, and he is a 10-month seasonal position.
Okay, in regards to the salary ordinance, the way it usually works is upon adoption of the budget, the ordinance will be introduced. The purview of the salary ordinance isn't specifically to the point of this is what the total dollar figure is. So at the time you introduced the salary ordinance, somebody's salary could have been over. But up until that point in time, they will not have been paid that full dollar amount. So as long as the salary ordinance is amended prior to 12/31, you're in compliance with it. So that's for 14. As far as 2013, this is the first I'm hearing of it, so I'm going to take a look.
I printed it out to show you specifically. And just, Paul, as a follow-up, at the east, it just says golf professional, not assistant or anything as their job description.
Okay, he is considered the assistant pro at the Knoll East.
Okay. I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I think the salary ordinance has two different positions, assistant and professional, and that's a different pay range.
Yeah, he's hourly, the assistant pro. Mm-hmm.
Right. In the budget, it has him down as salaried for
Right,
for
but
yearly
he's
salary.
based on an hourly.
When I do the budget, I will usually put an estimate in on what the maximum area the salary would go to. If I put in hourly, it's a guesstimate, and we all know I hate guessing anything. So what I will do is put the worst case, what it could be at that moment.
Roy Messmer, 10 Vernon Drive. I'll be quick tonight. Everybody better check their pants because I just had a tick on me. Fumigate the place. I don't know if I don't know. It was on the outside of my pants. Anyway, before I get to the question I want to get, what I really came here for tonight, just something for you guys to consider next year, men and women. Instead of throwing out candy at the Memorial Day parade, can you hand something out like this or the American flag? It's not Halloween. I saw some kids going under cars. I saw Sabina in the Mayor's Explorer. Boy, she was nervous. And I'm being serious because it's not Halloween. Oops. Anyway. All right, here we go again. It's a year now. And I just want to get where we stand because Justin last week, John, made a statement that the state has not yet approved the letter to go out with our tax advice bill regarding the occupancy tax. And I had a meeting with him well over a month ago, and I know I didn't misunderstand him, that it was approved by the state. We could put it in the tax advice. So if you could just recap tonight, that's my last thing here tonight. Well, one other thing, before you even get to that, but that was, I didn't understand the answer to Jonathan's question. If he's right on that, that's a good catch by him regarding the salary ordinance for 2013. I know 14, you could probably do a resolution, do it retroactive, but if it's 13, do the employees have to give the money back? I don't know. I didn't catch it because I was more concerned about this tip.
No, the employee doesn't have to get back funds.
They don't have to pay it back?
No.
If they exceed the salary?
No,
I would have to take a look at the employees. I don't know what the violation is.
Okay.
There are a lot of times, to give a better answer, that the income isn't always the full amount if there's overtime or stipends involved.
Okay. But if you could answer that next council meeting, Joe, I appreciate it. Mr. Inglesino, do you have any update on that occupancy?
I don't, Mr. Mesmer. you surprised me. All I can do is follow up with
Okay.
with Justin.
Okay, because now it's a year, and, you know, I still want to pursue this pilot situation too, so hopefully that's not going to take a couple of years, so I can get, you know, an answer from the administration, from this council. Next Tuesday, do you think you'll have an answer? Because the tax advice bills come out in about a month and a half.
I will confer with Justin
Okay,
tomorrow.
all right. Oh, well, bye-bye.
Pat Pataccia, 182 Hawkins Avenue. Joe, hi.
Pat,
I forgot to come see you. You don't have those answers on you tonight, do you, about the open space and the money I asked?
not with me.
We'll
Just
make that
stop in,
yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. Do you know anything, I had received a letter in the mail about Ball Avenue being possibly worked on today. I don't, you know, it wasn't started, so I'm just questioning if it's been changed.
I'll go back and verify that.
Okay.
Letter went out, though, right?
Yeah.
Letter did go out.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll find out why it wasn't started. I'll check with Greg.
I mean, it's no big deal, but I just want to make sure that it wasn't pushed off a little bit so I can let everybody know.
No, that I haven't heard.
Okay. The salary ordinances, all ordinances. Guys, you got to be more careful with these things. I mean, you know, we know there are ordinances out there. We should be looking at them before we okay anything. So please take that into consideration. We're just, again, wasting taxpayers.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, see no one else come forward, entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Motion made by Mr. Valori,
Second.
seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Mr. Paluso?
Yes.
Mr. Valori?
Yes.
Mr. Karifi?
Yes. Okay, at this time, entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Valori. Roll call.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Mr. Paluso?
Yes.
Mr. Valori?
Yes.
Mr. Karifi?
Yes. Good night.